This is Micornus Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. I continue with the very same topic. We're speaking about the ministry of the elders. What a topic we're having here. And exciting because it's a very, very important topic. As I said, that a church in the New Testament, right now in the age that we're living in our generation, should be led by elders. As we have seen that Jesus appointed disciples that in turn became apostles. And they used the same model, continuing actually leading the church of the living God. And we have been embarking on this topic that asks the question, does governance by elders eliminate the role of the special leader? Does it eliminate the role of the visionary? Does it eliminate the role of the pastor, senior pastor? No. And the answer is no. And that's the reason why we mentioned that there might be some elders, particularly in bigger churches, whereby some elders may be overseeing a group of elders. If, say, for instance, you're having 20 elders in a big church, you might actually appoint, say, 4 elders or even 5, whereby there will be leaders of about 4 groups of 4 or 5 other elders, whereby they will be able to oversee them or to supervise them or to lead them. And that's very important. So in bigger churches, therefore, there's nothing wrong in appointing leaders and promoting them actually into senior elders. And that is why the word senior elder sometimes speaks also to bishops. That's why we see the word bishop, particularly in the days that we're living in, is because these are senior elders. These are the ones that may oversee other elders, or they may be actually leading other elders as well. And that's an emphasis that I want to make so that we understand as well that there's nothing wrong about somebody being called a bishop. Is more purely because it's a senior elder that would be overseeing other elders as well. Now, I want to also emphasize the issue that a position of leadership does not and should not at all imply spiritual superiority. And I want to start there because I think many people start using now what they are in spiritual calling, and they start actually oppressing others to play a bigger brother role, to an extent that they're starting to behave like they're senior than others. And we have seen this happening, particularly in our generation, where other people feel they are better than others, where other people feel they're automatically senior than others. Now, superiority complex is problematic when it comes to the kingdom of God. And I want to emphasize that as elders, we should actually be careful of not playing the bigger brother role, and not actually oppressing others and thinking that others are less, and therefore we are more superior than them. And that's the problem that we have in the church, and that causes divisions as well in the church. It seems unlikely that Peter was the most spiritually qualified of the disciples. Now, I want to give an example of Peter. That Peter, though he was mentioned much more frequently, he was the spokesperson of the team generally. But I want to emphasize that it doesn't look like he was the most matured person. If he was, then you will realize that during the journey towards the crucifixion of Jesus, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Now, I don't expect somebody who is spiritually superior and much more matured could be denying his master. I can't imagine that. Then it really shows that Peter was not necessarily the most senior spiritually. But he was somebody who was actually appointed, or he became, because of his influence, he became a spokesperson of the team. But that doesn't mean that his position was higher than the rest of the people. And I want to emphasize that. Now, perhaps James and John came to Jesus. They came to Jesus to ask for the highest places in because of they thought that Peter was not qualified. And you remember when they came and they wanted to say, we want to be on the right and another, my brother, will be on the left. And they started to request some positions from Jesus Christ. And maybe they thought, but Peter is leading us. Maybe Peter is not highly qualified. And that's the reason that we want positions. Maybe that was the reason. But I want to just to speak and say, it was not necessarily that Peter was more superior spiritually. It was really just because he was a leader. So this is very important that we understand that. Now, even though he was a leader, he certainly was not spiritually superior to the others. And that I've just emphasized. it should be noted that James, the less, was the most spiritual of all others. So James seems to have been the most spiritual, though he was looking like the less in the group. And I want us to understand that it is not those positions are not signifying the spirituality in them. They were just because they've got different gifts. And there's this one who will have a gift of leadership, though he may not be highly spiritual as well. And that's very important that we acknowledge and respect them, even though they may not be highly spiritual, but the administrative issue is that they are gifted in administration. So elders should be respected despite of whether they're spiritually powerful or not, because sometimes we undermine them based on the level of spirituality as well. And that's very key that we want that. So he may have had marvelous gifts, news of which was not recorded live or was not recorded because Peter, as the spokesperson for the group, was a dominant group. Because when you have got a dominant one in the group, may actually overshadow the rest of the gifts of others, in the sense that they may not be magnified because he's the spokesperson. It may not show up, but it doesn't make him better than others. That's the point that we're driving today. And I hope this is actually something that we can learn from. So we don't know, but it does no disservice to the equality of the 12 that one of them would lead the rest of the group, because that makes it easier. Because for administrative purposes, you need one to lead. Because where there's no leader, there's no direction. Where there's no leader, there's no guidance at all. And that is why you need to have a leader. Now, I want to emphasize that even in churches, you might find that your leader or the visionary, the pastor, is not the most brilliant person, and it doesn't need to be the most brilliant person. And I want you to understand that when he's called by God to be the leader, he is called by God, then we must respect him despite of whether he can speak articulate English or not. Because sometimes we undermine the lead pastors, which are the senior pastors, just because they cannot speak English like yourselves. Then you undermine them, and therefore you make them to be less or to look less than you. And that doesn't augur well, because that which God has appointed, we must respect. And I want to urge elders in different churches that respect your fellow pastors, respect your senior pastor, even though it may look like you're brilliant more than them. But continue respecting them, because they are the ones that God has put on the pedestal to take forward the church with the vision that God has given unto him. And I want to emphasize that it is actually very diabolic that in many churches you find elders not respecting the senior pastor because they feel like the senior pastor is not educated than them, is not wealthy like them, is not recognizable like them, is not famous like them. Now, that should not matter, because this is the kingdom of God. And I want to emphasize that when you respect your senior pastor, despite of him not being famous, despite of him not being too educated than yourself, God will reward you, because God respects the structures that he has put in there, and we need to respect them as well. And that's very, very important that we emphasize that. Now, the book of Acts reveals the same phenomenon. The early church apparently regarded James as the leader and the spokesperson or spokesman for the entire group. You look at it in the book of Acts chapter 12, verse 17. And I want you to look at the book of Acts chapter 15, verse 13 as well. It will show you that James was appointed to become a spokesperson of them. Now, although he was not in any kind of an official position over the other elders, they seemed to look to him for leadership. So at least in Jerusalem church, Peter was present, yet James was in charge. Their roles clearly differed, but no one was the leader of everything. And this is very important. And I want to emphasize the fact that no one can be the leader of everything. So therefore, we want to emphasize as church governance solutions that allow each other to lead in different areas, because your gifts are not the same. So others are gifted in music. There might be elders that lead music. team. There are those that are gifted in different other areas, but respect them in those areas as well, because you cannot be gifted the same. And that must be emphasized in any single church or any local church, wherever you are. Because the more you respect each other, the more the church will run smoothly, because we cannot be of the same gifts. We complement each other, yes, because you are gifted for something else, I'm gifted for something else, and the other is gifted for something else. And that's very important, that we bring those gifts in synergy to serve the Lord together with the gifts that God has given us. And that must be emphasized in every single church, that elders respect and honor each other and make sure that they respect the protocol as well that God has put in that particular church. Now, Peter and John are the two main characteristics or main characters in the first 12 chapters of the book of Acts, and I'm sure you see that. When you look at the first 12 chapters of the book of Acts, you see that Peter and John are main characters there. Yet there's no record that John ever preached a single sermon. And is it not amazing? It is amazing, because it is not by preaching, therefore, it shows you, it's not by standing on the pulpit and preaching that makes you more senior. But we see that John, though he never preached a sermon, or we never see a record of him preaching a sermon, but he was still highly regarded. Yet there's no record of him even addressing a team of people. And I want to emphasize that. Now, again, Peter did all the talking. It wasn't that John didn't have anything to say, no, but he was respecting Peter. When he finally articulated his message, he wrote the Gospel of John in the three epistles. First John chapter 1, First John and Second John and Third John. Three epistles. So he finally articulated his message. Though he was quiet all along, but he articulated his message in these epistles. And I want you to see that though he was quiet, but this man was very powerful as well. Now, the book of Revelation as well was written by John. And I hope that we can understand that he has put pen to paper in all the messages that, though he never preached in the book of Acts, he never showed up anywhere preaching. But this is how he preached. And you look at the book of Revelation, you look at the books of the epistles, First John, Second John, Third John, you see how powerful they are. It shows that this man was powerful as well. Then we cannot undermine him. But Peter had unique gifts. And in the plan of God, he was to be the spokesperson. John's was supporting the role, not less important role, but a different one completely, because John was just supporting Peter, and we see that John, therefore, would support Peter fully without any fail. And this is very important, that as elders, we support each other, even in church, in different roles that we occupy. Now, beginning in Acts chapter 13, Paul and Barnabas became the dominant characters. So, and I've said that Peter and John in the first 12 chapters of the book of Acts, but then we see Paul and Barnabas taking over from the book of Acts chapter 13 going forward. And although Barnabas was probably the leading teacher in the church before Paul came in, we realize that Paul totally dominated the Jew. The Greeks even named him the Mercury, because he was the chief spokesperson. And I want to emphasize that it shows that Barnabas was continuing preaching before even Paul was converted into Paul. Saul was converted into Paul. But then when Paul came in, that we see that Barnabas take the back seat then. And then Paul started to become dominant. And this is very important for us to be able to recognize that. Now, also, his role in the ministry with Paul, I'm talking about Barnabas now, it was different from the apostles. Less visible. He was perhaps, but not less important either. So he was less visible, but yet he was not less important. And that's very important that we emphasize that. Now, every ministry we see in the New Testament is a team effort, and that's what we're emphasizing today. Paul continually commended the people who worked with him Yet that does not eliminate the unique roles of leadership that others were leading. But it does mean there's no place for a dictatorial, self-styled leader, and like the what we call Diotrephes, who loved to be first in the book of First John chapter 9. The book of First John chapter 9. We're having a man called Diotrephes who liked attention, who liked to be loved first, who liked to be recognized first. And that's not the way that the church should be led. And I want to end up here today, your host, Micornus Phokane, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. This topic is rich. This topic is powerful. And we will continue with it tomorrow once more. May the good Lord bless you. But before I check out, I remind you of our social media platforms, Church Governance Solutions, Facebook page. And I want you to also remember that we got also Micornus Phokane as a Facebook page. But also we have YouTube channel, Young Men Empowerment Forum. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Don't forget our TikTok account as well under Micornus Phokane. The good Lord will bless you as you follow us. And allow me to check out right here and say cheers for now.